Liz, what a treat. We're here with our boss, Jonathan Costa, the Executive Director of EdAdvance.
We are so excited for this interview.
This is cool. So, John, how are you?
I'm great, Matt. Thank you. How are you? And Liz, how are you?
Doing well.
Excellent.
So this is one of the special summer episodes, although we're close to the beginning of school, and we wanted to have an opportunity to think through some things with Jonathan. He is kind of a co-conspirator, I have to say. The three of us talk a lot. He's a very helpful, big thinker around this topic, and we all explore it in different ways. You know, Liz thinks about knitting patterns. I think about bias. John thinks about time. We're going to explore all of these topics as we get started here today. But first, John, just catch us up. Who the heck are you? How'd you get here?
Well, it's a long story, a 40-year story, so I'll try to give you a summary. But before I do that, I just want to thank you and Liz for the opportunity to be with you today. And thank you also for giving me credit from time to time in your pre-show or post-show mentions. But people should know that the work that is done to make this podcast work is done all by you two. My contribution is I had the good wisdom to hire you. And beyond that, it's pretty much all your game. And I really appreciate all the wonderful work you're doing for the agency. But I started as a high school history teacher, all boys, then all girls, then public co-ed. Did a little stint in the for-profit sector while my wife Wendy was getting her master's degree. And then came here to the agency in 1990, 6 years as a consultant. That's when I hired you for the first time, Matt, if you remember. And then 12 years of self-employment, and came back in 2008 as the Director of Professional Learning, and then as Assistant Executive Director in 2016. So it seems like a circuitous path, but in a lot of ways, I pull from all those experiences to sort of give me the perspective that I have now in this new role.
What was the private sector gig?
I worked for Domino's Pizza Distribution Corp. At the world headquarters of Domino's Pizza. And I was hired because I was the only applicant in a pool that knew anything about curriculum building. And they were at that time looking to leverage their status as the fastest growing company in the world. So I helped create something called Domino's University, where people would come from other companies to take courses in how people could manage the Domino's way.
I love it. I wonder what Domino's would do with AI. This was
That was 1987.
Oh, we just revealed your age, didn't we?
Yes. Well, and that was my fourth job. So age is creeping up on me.
Yeah. We talk about that a lot. Yeah. Not Liz. She's the youngster.
Yes.
So you've had a couple tours of duty here at EdAdvance. You're now the executive director. How does it feel to be in that role? What is it like to lead an agency like this? Well,
it is, in many ways, it feels, to borrow a term that I know Liz is fond of, it seems like sort of a capstone for me. If you think about all of the different threads I mentioned about my previous experience, it seems like if you twisted them all together, there were really good background to taking this last step in terms of career management and career responsibility. I feel a great responsibility to the agency and to my colleagues, because I think we really do provide an incredibly important service to our districts and their communities, and especially in a time of rapidly advancing change, districts need a place to go to that they can trust to help manage, provide efficient services, et cetera. So I think there has never been a more important time for a regional center, and I feel in some ways the weight of that responsibility, but also the greatness of the opportunity that's embedded in it.
So as we think about this new role that you have and our podcast on AI, what's your vision for AI with respect to the organization and your leadership efforts?
In a lot of ways, I would look at it in a couple of different lenses. The first lens is how we provide our services directly to our districts and their communities. And how can we at the agency use AI to either increase the quality of our service or save time and create efficiencies in our delivery of that service so we can do other things without expanding expenses and enlarging our footprint. So can we do more with what we have, and can we do what we're doing better? And if an AI application can serve either one of those two purposes internally, then I think we should deploy it. And as you know, we've developed an AI strategies team. We have a director of AI strategy, and we're trying to marshal our resources to explore both of those avenues. The other part of it is helping districts rethink the practice of public education through the lens of AI. What changes will AI bring to the pursuit of public education? What does it mean to be educated in an era of AI? I think these are really interesting questions that don't have simple answers. And when you're trying to help coordinate and support 31 different districts, being there as a resource as they think through those questions, I think is a really important role. And we've always, in a public setting, had a balance between trying to lead but also being responsive and listening. So striking that balance between helping them think through it, but also responding to requests, responding to questions that they have of us is also a critical role. So that's sort of a dual purpose pursuit of AI at the agency.
You've been so articulate about the teaching and learning impacts, and I'm sure we'll talk about that. But I also want to kind of throw a tricky one at all the three of us to think through. Liz and I have been very gratified. A fair number of superintendents have been listening to the podcast. And one piece that I know they're thinking about is as you described, to help them think through this stuff, there will be impacts on the back office, so to speak, whether it's special ed or the size of the data team or HR or transportation or food service or finance. Some of our districts are in the part of the state where there are folks in their boards that are tied to New York City. Those folks are very familiar with the idea that AI is going to change. I'm being so delicate here. I don't want to say the word cut, eliminate, replace, but roles for people look different in a world of AI, and back offices could be different. People, time, money, budgets. Like, if you feel like you're up for it, how are you going to guide them?
In a lot of ways, the answer to that question depends on scale. So if you have an accounting department with 25 people in it, right, and you get a 20% efficiency, is it possible you're going to lose or could do without 3 or 4 of those positions? It's possible. But if you're a small, tiny school district with a half-time, accounting person, there's no way that AI, in my opinion, is going to eliminate the need for human expertise at some level. So you're not going to go from half-time to no time. You're still going to need that person there. It might increase their, the efficiency of their work. It may improve the quality of their work, but I still see them needing a person there. So I think the larger the district, the greater the potential for some reduction in staff time. But contrary to public perception, there is not a lot of fat in the administration of public schools. So I don't think the biggest impact of AI on schools is going to be back office. I think it'll increase efficiency. Through attrition, you lose an employee or 2 along the way. If you have 5 or 6 people in your accounting office, that's possible. And I don't mean to single out accounting. It could be any one of the back office functions that you mentioned. But I think the overall human impact from a number of FTEs is going to be fairly limited. But I do think it is going to create efficiencies and improvements of quality of service on the back end that will eventually help schools manage their affairs more effectively.
Yeah, that's totally fair. So you're prepared here and now to say that you're not going to let Rich Carmelek, the director of finance, go?
It just depends. No, I've publicly said to all of our staff that my hope at EdAdvance is that this is a way that we can use to improve the quality of our work. And I don't see a position being eliminated because of AI. I see the quality of services improving. Could we lose a position through attrition? That's possible. But we run already a pretty lean shop, and I just think this is going to help us do our jobs better.
So you do, speaking of working with superintendents, you do a lot of work with leaders. You're a go-to guy for strategic planning. I think you've helped build the strategic plan of pretty much every district in the state of Connecticut 2 or 3 times. So is it every decade maybe? So the world of AI we've characterized it as an adaptive leadership function. It's unlike technical leadership where you know where the rocket is going to land, we really don't know where AI is going to land. So how do you help school leaders or teachers or department chairs think about this, topic that impacts what kids need to know and be able to do, what instructional design looks like? We just talked about the back office. How do you help people be prepared for a world where we know the inputs but don't know the end game?
Well, I think the most important thing is that even if you don't know the end game, you need to have a vision of what you think the end game is going to be, or else you risk simply being untethered and you have no framework upon which to make decisions. Any journey between point A and point B that involves beliefs, attitudes, human beings is never going to be a linear process. And that's why adaptive leadership is so important. If we think about teaching and learning in a pre-digital era and what that same teaching and learning function might look like in an AI era, we know it is going to be different. We know there is no straight line between where you are and where you want to be. There are always going to be landmines. There are going to be things that happen that you don't anticipate. But if you have a sense of what you're trying to do, you have beliefs around what is appropriate and what's not, and you have a sense of the direction you want to go, then you have the framework you need to make leadership decisions that at least point you in the right direction. But without that grounding of, by the time we're done, we want every student to have these skills, these dispositions, and this bit of core knowledge, then you can take the inputs and rearrange them and reorganize them to the best of your ability. But you've got to have that outcome vision at least somewhat solidified, or else you're really not going to be in any position to make good decisions going forward. So if you know you're going to be in that situation, you need flexibility, you need adaptability, you need to be looking at inputs as they occur, thinking about them continuously so that you end up near where you want it to go. There's so much good literature around what good adaptive leadership looks like, and this era we are entering, I think, makes it one of the most important things we can do for our member districts is help them in that decision-making process so they can at least start leaning in the right direction.
Yeah, well said. That makes a lot of sense.
So as you think about all these challenges that schools are going to face as AI brings about change or accelerates challenges, what do you think is the toughest part for schools?
I think the toughest thing is easy to identify, and that is giving teachers the tools and space they need to create rigorous, challenging, and durable activities in the classroom. I know you have talked on the podcast about the way we have as a team sort of articulated this difference between goals for learning and teaching practices that are vulnerable to being undermined by AI and those same things that are durable in the face of AI, meaning a student really can't accomplish them without their own agency, without their own intellectual power. The challenge in that is that durable activities, durable goals for learning, all take longer to accomplish than things that we would think of as vulnerable. So we already have a wildly overstuffed curriculum expectation in just about every discipline. This comes out of the standards movements in the 90s, way before the internet, way before artificial intelligence. And we keep carrying that expectation and that assessment expectation that kids are going to be able to acquire these just rafts of standards in every discipline. It's just not realistic. So what do kids really need to know and be able to do to be successful in a world 2036, 2040? The students who enter kindergarten next fall, this coming school year, are going to be the class of 2037. What do we think they're going to need? It certainly is not what we have articulated in the Common Core. It's too much. So how do we make good decisions about what kids really need to know and be able to do, teach it in a durable way, assess it in a durable way, and give teachers the tools and time and space they need to do it well? That transition from where we are to where we need to be, I think, is the hardest part of what this transition is going to be.
How overstuffed do you think we are? It's a crude question, but if you imagine that everything you're saying is true, I don't think any of us would disagree. Crude number, what do you think we need to cut?
50%.
And how do you do that?
Well, in some ways, we've already started. So if you go and look at most recent curriculum iterations, they will talk about power standards. They'll talk about those things that get woven from K through 12. These are the things you really need to focus on. And then they put all the others in there. So if you just started with the power standards and leave the rest out, and you teach those with fidelity, engagement, and rigor, my estimate is that kids will actually retain more than they are right now, where you're going through 100% of it in a way that we know very little of it is being retained long term. So, and this is just math, and I'm not a mathematician, but if you teach a lot poorly versus teaching a little well, what school would you rather be in? What method of preparation works best for kids that are going to be swimming in data, swimming in facts? They need the tools to understand what facts and data they need, how to find it, how to validate it, how to kick the tires on it, and how to add value by using it. These are the skills that kids are going to need in an era of ubiquitous facts. We need to be training them for that era.
I sort of remember, you might have been a provocateur, but for a little while doing strategic planning, you had a just one thing kind of focus, right? Tell us about that.
So those of us of a certain age remember the movie City Slickers and Curly going, you know what you got to do? You got to figure out what one thing is. What's that one thing? And you got to do that well. And the whole idea behind it is, if you can master something and do it well, then you have the tools you need to master and do anything well. But if you've never learned something to fluency, then everything else is just half-baked. So the whole idea behind one thing is pick something you're passionate about. This is something I know
knitting.
My friend Dr. Rade is passionate about. Pick one thing and understand the discipline it is required to reach fluency in it. You test it, try it, fail at it, get feedback, get better, work hard. It's the Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hour rule. If you can do that, then you are ready to do that in any area. And I think this is really important in this era, because how many jobs do we think kids are going to get right out of high school or college that are never going to change? How many non-career changers are we educating? And I would say that the number is probably very low. Right. So you're going to have to learn different things, and you're going to have to learn them to fluency. So the whole idea of that one thing is give every kid an opportunity to master something, to understand the discipline it takes to learn something well, because that will prepare them to learn anything well.
I think that's where we talk about the power of personal interest projects, that they are content agnostic. And what you're saying is it really can be content agnostic, whether it's knitting or basketball or bike riding or writing poetry, whatever it is, that if you learn how to be a learner, that's the skill. And so when we talk about all the skills you can develop in a personal interest project about learning to learn and learning to master something, it all just makes so much sense.
Right. And they are content agnostic, but they are not skill agnostic, right? You need discipline. You need focus. You need to be able to learn from failure. You need to be able to seek out mentors. These are things that good self-directed learners do. And anyone that's mastered any area of interest has had those skills. And by the way, they are in 90% of every district's portrait of the graduate. This is what we say kids need, but we so focus them on trying to master, tons of irrelevant and unconnected facts that we lose sight of the things that they most need because we don't have time to teach them. We don't have time to give kids the opportunity to develop them. I know Liz knows this story. I went to a school in Spain before the pandemic called the Madrid Active School. And if you can imagine a Montessori school on steroids, that's what this was. Kids from pre-K to sixth grade, basically in self-directed learning groups, even at the very young age, just exploring, learning, being self-directed. Every one of those kids at the end of sixth grade was self-regulated, a problem solver, had good personal interaction skills, good communication skills. They were essentially what we determine our portrait of the graduates to be. Could they have aced the smarter balance? Probably not. But the things that are the hardest to teach, they all had in spades. It's a very hard model to replicate here in the States, but it's possible if you give learners the opportunity and structure to learn something they are interested in and be metacognitive about what they're doing on the way, on that journey of learning, then we are preparing them for a world that is going to require them to adapt and change and learn new things as the environment around them changes.
And does AI create some unlock for that? I mean, if I think back to the period of time that you were encouraging districts to really narrow their focus, they tried, but my recollection is that they really struggled. Like the other 50% was still sitting there. Is this era that we're moving into with AI somehow create a new opportunity to really narrow that focus and achieve a learning environment in the way that you're describing it here?
I think what it does is two things. First of all, it provides that learner with another set of tools which to fuel their self-direction, right? You're sitting at home, there's no one to call or ask, hey, Pi,
right,
or hey, Chat, how could I do this? Could I do this better? Could you give me feedback on that? So it provides learners with tools to be more self-directed. So that's one half of it. The other side is it just creates an environment where you can see the uselessness of chasing your factual tale for no reason other than you were assigned it. I didn't coin these terms, but the whole idea of a just-in-case curriculum. We're going to teach you this just in case at some point in your life somebody asks you this question or you end up on Jeopardy and you need to know the answer. And pre-digital, that was a really sound learning strategy or learning goal. But we are, with every day, increasingly in a just-in-time world. And that requires a just-in-time learning skill set, which we have yet to really master teaching on a broad scale in public school. And I think that's the shift we're going to need to make.
So I want to try to push back just a little bit because I've so enjoyed listening to you, present on this topic and think about this. But when we think about the 50%, right? You have this environment right now, maybe it will change, but AI hallucinates regularly, right? It's just making stuff up. And suddenly it seems like critical thinking is the power skill. So all of us need to kind of know something. We use in training this illustration of a Belgian philosopher named Antoine de Machelet. And Machelet did this and that. And he was born in Belgium and blah, blah, blah. And I showed this whole essay written about him, except for it's BS. It was a hallucination made up by AI. So what if the 50% of the content knowledge that you needed to spot that hallucination turned out to be Antoine de Machelet?
To me, it comes down to, are you using the tools appropriately? So a chainsaw is a great tool to cut down a tree. It's not a great tool for cutting a wedding cake. How are you going to use the tool in the right way? If you're using AI to argue facts and you're relying on AI for those facts, you are misusing that tool, at least in the current context. If we do a better job at eliminating hallucinations, we Google search things for facts all the time. Sometimes that's wrong too. We need some critical thinking there. But in the current context, if you are using chat or any other large language model for specific detailed facts, you are using it improperly. If you're using it to brainstorm, if you're using it to get feedback on your writing, if you're using it to write code and you know the code works, you're using it appropriately. And I think that as the level of hallucination changes, the use of that tool will change. It's a matter of aligning the tool with the goal and the outcome and making sure those things line up appropriately.
All right, fair enough. Antoine does not live on to see another day. He'll be fact-checked by Wikipedia.
That's it.
Okay.
So, Jonathan, I've talked a lot about how I use AI in knitting and basketry and other parts of my life, but you are a remarkable athlete. You bike, you golf, you go to the gym. So how has AI impacted these parts of your life, if it has at all?
It's interesting that you should ask that, and it has impacted all three of those areas. In thinking about this, the thing that you need is a goal to improve. If you aspire to improve something in your life, I will guarantee you that there is an AI tool that will help you do it. So in golf, there are devices you can put on the end of every club. It'll track every swing. It'll give you insight as to the things you do well, the things you don't do well. It'll give you a practice plan. If you want to improve something, there is a tool that will help you get there. For the gym, there are apps like Fitbod or Smart Gym. You give it your age, you give it your goal, you give it your level of experience, you tell it the equipment you have, and it will generate workouts for you. It'll generate a plan of improvement for you. And as you enter your data, it'll adjust what you should be trying to do. As you get better, it will push you further. On the bike, I set this ridiculous goal for myself when I turned 60. I wanted to ride 100 miles in less than 6 hours.
You failed, I'm pretty sure, right?
I did.
Wait, you did?
I did fail.
Oh, that was just like a softball setup. Of course I crushed it. My first attempt when I turned 60, I completed in, this is a true story, 6 hours and 6 seconds. Now, that's your version of failure.
With one of my heroes being Monk, you can imagine how insane that drove me. So last year, in my second year, I actually did not attempt it because I had signed up for a cycling camp that had different goals. This was short, extreme efforts, climbing, speed. So endurance was not part of the equation. So this is my third try, my third year. And in fact, I started a training plan this morning based on a recommendation from Garmin. When's the date? When do you want to do it? What's the distance? 100 miles. What's your level of experience? Pretty good. All right, here's your 20-week training plan to get this goal. And as I ride, it tracks my heart rate, my power output, my VO2 max, and it will tell me what I need to do to get there and whether I actually have a shot at reaching my goal. So if you want to improve, I'm sure at this point, it doesn't matter what it is. There is a tool that'll help you. All you need is a desire to get better.
Liz, I feel fatigued just listening to this.
I'm wondering if there's an AI app that can do the exercise for me, because that's really where I get stuck.
I don't know about the part where it says, like, do you have a shot, right? Because there's all this whole mindset thing, right? Every great movie is like, no, you don't have a shot, but you still pulled it off.
That's right. And it's funny because, Matt, I have attended one of your spin classes, and I never attend spin classes because I have a fairly high degree of self-motivation, and I don't need someone to yell at me to try harder because I'm already trying hard, I promise you. So the way that the AI works for me is it takes that human element out of it. I know where my motivation's coming from. I need to know the numbers, right? What kind of power output do I need to maintain over 6 hours to go 100 miles? And it turns out I need to average 16.7 miles an hour. So I know exactly what my targets are, and I know what I'm going to have to do to get there. And if I'm within shouting distance of it, I'll do it because I want it. But it helps me understand what I have to do to get there.
Right. It's all internalized anyhow. Wild.
I got a Fitbit for Christmas, and it lasted 3 days on my wrist because it kept telling me to get up and exercise.
I will not.
You should rent a paint shaker. Put it on that. It'll increase the number of steps dramatically.
Throw it in the dryer. It works just as well. All right. So, Jonathan, if you had a magical AI prediction machine, what's one of the most intriguing things you'd like to have it predict?
Yeah, boy. This is fodder for about 100 really good science fiction movies. I really don't want to know where AI is taking us, because I think it creates all of the nightmare scenarios one way or the other that you can imagine. It removes you from the responsibility of good decision making if you know where it's going. But I would really like to know someone else's opinion of the what do we need to know question. So I said 50% because that was sort of my off the top of my head, given everything that we're trying to do. How much more time do we need to do this stuff well? Well, if we cut out 50%, we'd have it. But I honestly don't know what the answer to that question is. And I think we need a collective effort to answer it in a way that most people can get on board with. And I think that's important, right? If one person comes up with the answer, but no one around them believes it, or no one around them will buy into it, then we struggle. We need a critical mass of educators to sort of coalesce around a pared down, thoughtful set of critical learning goals and skill outcomes that we want for every child. And if I had a prediction machine about which 10 things or which 20 things are really the most critical to master pre-K to 12, and I could use that answer to help coalesce communities around a change strategy to get there, I think that would be the most helpful thing to navigate this very potentially challenging transition period over the next 5 to 10 years as we sort of plunge into the full AI era that's ahead of us.
So thinking about these, what are those magical things that need to be there? Maybe it's not one thing, and but it's certainly, I don't think anyone would disagree with the cut it in half and then some. We've been kind of like beating on a drum consistently here. Well, two things. Ethan Mollick, do you have any thoughts about him?
I'm wondering where on the time clock his name was mentioned, because I had the first 6 minutes on my Ethan Mollick mentioned bingo card, and I think this is a little late, so I think I lost. But he is a really thoughtful person and a great thinker, and I enjoy interacting with his thinking from time to time as well.
John makes a good point. He has slipped back more and more in the. I think it's just it's a reflection of random occurrence in the universe.
All right, I'll go with that.
Okay. So the other thing, though, that we're consistently coming back to is that we believe, right, that folks are a little obsessed with the chatbot, especially text-based. So when you think about these critical things that kids need to know and be able to do, you, like Liz and I, enjoy having these conversations with Pi, but we're pretty confident that within a year, there's going to be, I can put on my, AR glasses and I'll be sitting across from any historical character I want to talk to and have a totally fluid conversation with them where they can become this master teacher in a piece of content. Ideally, that leaves more time for teachers to facilitate, interesting, more project-based approaches. But are we drinking our own Kool-Aid? What do you think about this whole idea that we're going to move from the text-based chatbot to something much more dynamic and engaging?
Well, I mean, that's what we should be doing. Going back to our previous point about durable and vulnerable, I think hands-on, value-added, rigorous, challenging experiences are the training ground of a mind in an AI era. And if you could measure one thing that is an indicator of potential success in any classroom teacher's learning environment, it is the percentage of time on a class-by-class basis that students are doing that kind of work. That is the one biggest predictor of a teacher's success. So if you can motivate, challenge, inspire kids to apply themselves to rigorous, challenging work, you are worth twice what we pay teachers today. If you think your primary value to a district, to a student, is how much you know about your content, I really can't justify paying you twice as much because I can get that anywhere. That human connection, that human-to-human inspiration is what we really need our educators to be focused on, because engaging kids in the activities that build those skills, build those muscles, are really, I think, what the future of success looks like in education. And I think that is going to move us away from just text-based models, but think about text, symbols, notes, right? Pictures, whatever medium you need to build your expertise, to solve your problem, to add value, you're going to be drawing from all of those as you go forward. And I really think all of these tools will demonstrate the requirement for just being facile with as many different tools as you can have and use to solve problems and add value.
So when you think about all these ways that education can be improved and be made more rigorous and exciting and engaging for students using AI, what do you think are some of the biggest barriers to getting to that?
I think that's also an easy answer, and it is the current assessment infrastructure that we use to create accountability in schools. We have created a expectation, and it's one of the hangovers from No Child Left Behind, that test numbers equal accountability and quality in schools. And over, we see the deceit of that perception, but it hangs on, and it's a really hard thing to overcome. So we just in our state rethought teacher evaluation and dropped ratings from teachers because over 12 years of data showed it did nothing to inspire improvement in any way. So you go to a board of education and say, we have a new teacher evaluation tool that focuses on feedback and growth. And the first response frequently is, what? No more ratings? You're letting them off the hook. Well, there was no hook. It never worked. So let's make a different mistake. Let's try something that might actually work. So how do we assess and give kids feedback on the things that matter most? It is not the way we are currently testing and holding schools or teachers accountable. Just like durable activities take longer, assessing the type of skill that kids need to be successful is a much harder task. In fact, it is harder. It's not impossible to do with statistical reliability, but it is very challenging. So is it better to have perfectly reliable, valid data on meaningless things, or generally helpful, growth-inspiring data on things that really matter? And right now, in our public perception battle, we haven't even begun to wage that fight, and I think we really need to. There's as often as you quote Ethan Mollick, I'm a big fan of Malcolm Gladwell, and he did a podcast episode 3 or 4 years ago on his Revisionist History podcast about the LSATs. And he wove this story where he talked about what are the indicators of an effective attorney. And it's almost always they are deep thinkers, they are deliberate, they pay attention to facts, they care about their cases, they work hard, they see the long-term arc of a case and can see it through. And then what does the LSAT test? It tests quick response. Everything's timed. Everything's on the clock. So the very tool we use to screen attorney candidates for the most elite law schools has virtually no connection to the skill set those attorneys are going to need to actually be successful attorneys. So how do we align our method of assessment and accountability with the skills that we want kids to have? That is a challenge, and it needs a change in perception. It needs a change of practice, and I think that married with those curriculum changes that we talked about, focusing on the things that matter most, I think need to come together, and to do so at the state level and at the local level, because often we are following the admonitions of our State Department of Ed, and their 5-year plan, their most recent 5-year plan, does mention this. Whether or not they pursue it with a rigor that's needed to help get us to where we need to go is still a little bit of an open question.
It'll be interesting to see if AI helps, thread that needle a little bit. Liz covered a story in the spring, which was great, about PISA. Do you remember that one?
Yeah.
Yeah. About how there's going to be some AI used in the PISA, and that students are going to be using AI when they take the PISA to see how students are thinking and how they're using AI in answering questions. I was also thinking a lot about, when you were talking, is how inconsistent our grading system is. So when you think assessment, big picture, but then you go down to classroom grading, where there is no room for failure and learning from failure, which has been a big topic of this conversation, and that students, if they want to get an A, cannot fail at any point in the semester if we are using grading with averages and, these really inequitable ways of grading that don't encourage growth, that are just looking for perfection from the beginning. So I think that goes right along with assessment.
Absolutely. And perfection in what? Right? I mean, grades are... I'm really going to get myself into trouble here. You're leading me into these. People think that grades in general are based on something real, and they almost always are not. They're based on a archetype in the mind of a teacher, and most of the time, success is determined by your ability to decode that archetype. And we would do a whole lot better if we had clarity of purpose and believed that growth over time was a more important goal than a grade in the moment. That too is fighting against, 150 years of public school experience history that takes time to change. And these long-held perceptions, whether they are based on anything factual or real, to me are the most frustrating battles to fight, because I don't have any trouble entering an argument based on facts and reality. But when you start arguing about myths that have no supporting infrastructure at all. Sort of like, where do you go from there? How do you win that battle? Those kinds of tussles are frustrating.
Although you've done a nice job. I mean, I've got to watch you through your career. Sometimes it just takes an ability to really help folks connect the dots. So it's been a pretty interesting conversation, and we've unpacked a little bit around AI, a lot around some of the endemic challenges that we face in our enterprise, and to some degree how AI may disrupt, agitate, shake up some of those pieces. And so it's gratifying to know that you'll be in a leadership position. Now, you always have been, but now you're the top dog, right? So at least in our corner of the world, you can really help support school leaders and teachers and boards of education. I know you do a lot of work at the state level as well. So those are needles that you'll thread over the next couple of years in this role. Let's go to tomorrow, right? We're getting ready for school to come back in. I think you probably not having the opportunity to do a school convocation return. Liz, you missed this chapter, but when John and I were much younger, we did an album of music called School Songs 101 with great titles like No, I Can't Because I'm on Duty, or what else was on there?
PD Blues. No, Not My Johnny. Not My Johnny.
Right. So this was a survival mechanism. John had just hired me. I looked like I was 16, and he wanted to make sure that no one threw a tomato at me during convocation. So we did this very amusing album of music to disarm teachers. But all right, so I digress. So imagine you're out doing convocation, pulling back from these high-level strategies that I know you'll do a great job leading on. What's your message? How are you going to help teachers think about the year ahead of them with respect to AI?
Just don't be afraid. Embrace it. Make mistakes. There are two kinds of mistakes that you can make, right? You can make the kind of mistake where it is based on goodwill, trying to do the right thing, and headed in the right direction. It just doesn't work out. We can all recover from those. And then there are the kinds of mistakes that you can't recover from. And I understand that sometimes there's a fine line, but most of the time, making a mistake or trying something, experimenting, using AI to try to encourage kids to be interested in what you're doing, to try to build their own skills, to help them develop the competencies they need to be successful. Just do it. Get out there, try it, learn, use it yourself. We are going to be shifting and changing and moving, hopefully, in a direction that embraces all of the tools that kids have available to help them be successful. And think about where they're going rather than where you have been. And I think if that is your mindset, we will make better decisions on behalf of kids as we all work together to try to navigate this really, admittedly challenging path forward.
Yeah. What a nice place to end.
I love it.
Jonathan, we're so grateful for your time and your input and your leadership. And we're just really looking forward to navigating all of these waters together with you in this new role. And it's going to be a great journey.
Well, one of the great pleasures of working at EdAdvance in the time that we are in is I'm surrounded by people that I just enjoy being with and enjoy working with and enjoy wrestling with these issues. When you have talented people of goodwill, there is really nothing that they can't accomplish together. And being part of this AI transition at EdAdvance puts me in contact with both of you frequently, and that is a great thing. So I really appreciate the invitation and keep up the great work with the pod.
Let's roll the credits.
All right. As always, we'd love to hear what you think, so please let us know at ChatEDU@edadvance.org. That's EDADVANCE.org. And also rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you are using. ChatEDU is brought to you by EdAdvance, the nonprofit regional education service center in Litchfield, Connecticut. ChatEDU is recorded, edited, and produced by Ahmed Malik, whose dedication and expertise bring our discussions to life. ChatEDU's executive producer is Cameron Audia. Additionally, we are grateful for the support of our colleague Gary Robinson. Gary is the ChatEDU Design and Outreach Ginsu knife, and we appreciate his time and talents. And of course, a big ChatEDU shout out to our fearless leader and executive director, Jonathan Costa, for inspiring the pod. And finally, a heartfelt thank you to our listeners for joining us on this journey exploring the thoughtful and innovative integration of AI in education.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jonathan Costa, and I am the Executive Director at EdAdvance, the regional nonprofit educational service center in Litchfield, Connecticut. On behalf of Matt and Liz and our entire agency, I want to thank you for listening to our ChatEDU podcast. We'll be dropping episodes weekly, and you'll hear some special interview episodes during the summer. Finally, keep an eye out this fall for our expanding AI community of practice and new AI micro-credentials for teachers and educational leaders. Take care, and thanks again, and tell your friends about ChatEDU.